Will, we're live. We made it another week and we're live. How are you, brother?
Hey, I'm doing just fabulous. Great to see you again, Steve. How are you, my friend?
I'm excellent. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Today is the Mindstate Marketing Hour with Will Leach. I'm Steve Brown, your co host, and today's topic is behavioral economics in marketing, exploring the limitations of will. What an interesting topic if you're a scientist. No?
So, Steve, I see a question down at the bottom of our slide. Is this how we start our show now? Is like we just ask random questions?
Yeah, well, this is funny that you're pointing that out. This is a live show, Will, and you would expect someone that's a co-host that would be organized on this. But are we still on the two fails and a win?
We are not, Steve. We are going. We like to bring in guests every other week now, and this year we decided to do something a little bit different. We bring in guests every other week. We're gonna have guests from all over, different walks of life, whether they're behavioral scientists or marketers or entrepreneurs or even chefs like we had last week. And but today is more of our traditional. Let's talk about behavioral science-based marketing, using these behavioral science principles in your business to grow. That's what we're going to be doing today.
Okay, so these topics are always really interesting for me. I work with a lot of folks, and although I'm not from your domain of expertise,
Yeah.
all these conversations start to bleed over into behavioral economics, really, whether we're calling it that or not.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in this topic, how to use, and you have the capital BE, behavioral economics, to nudge behaviors lack sophistication. What does that mean? Because now I'm insecure about what I've been doing.
Yeah. So this is one of those topics where if you're in the behavioral science research space or even a marketer out there, you may have heard of these words called nudge or behavioral economics, and you may have even been a person who has tried some of these techniques out in the last couple of years, and they haven't been successful. And what I want to do is talk, and this actually came because I had a client, a very big retail client. You guys would all know the name of them if I told you. And they came to us with a problem, and they've been struggling with this in-store problem for a while. And what they said is, we've tried so many different things, and we're coming to you, but to be honest, we don't really think that behavioral economics works, which is not good for me, right? Because I'm in the
Mhm.
world of behavioral economics, and they're already telling me that we don't really think it works. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about that. Well, we've been experimenting with this world of behavioral economics, whether it's in the research side or even application. We find that these are just things that don't really work in the real world. They don't really work. So I thought to myself, you know what? I hear that a lot. I really do hear that a lot. Um, and I hear it actually not from my clients as much, but though they've had bad experiences, no doubt about it. But it's actually out in LinkedIn. If you looked at LinkedIn, there's a lot of people that will post things like, that some of these studies can't be replicated, or is this just kind of a fad science? And what I would suggest to you, and I'm going to talk to you about this today, is that you know it's not the science that's the fad. It's a lack of sophistication in using the sciences. And let me tell you how I even got here. So you guys may know this book. It's famous book. Dan Ariely called Predictably Irrational. Hey, Steve, do you remember this book?
You've said it a million times,
That's
brother.
15 years ago, man. It changed my world. It
Uh-huh.
changed my life because I had never heard of the term behavioral economics. I was an econometrician, right? I was a classically trained marketing researcher, and I read this book and it talked about people making emotional decisions. I didn't believe that, Steve. I didn't believe people made emotional decisions. I believe they made rational decisions, right? That's the world I grew up in.
We think we do.
We think we do.
Yeah, but then later we're going, why did I make that decision? Let's come up with a good logical justification. Honey, why did I buy that cooker? Well, because when people come over, we can only cook inside.
That's right. That's right. And I rationalize, I feel good about that.
Hmm.
But when you try to sell me on that same cooker, talking about, well, this allows you the ability to cook outside when your friends come over, that's probably going to fall flat. It had nothing to do with your friends coming over. It was how it made you feel, Steve, when you were cooking that meat and smoking it and when you
Yeah.
made that purchase, right?
Yeah. When the fire department, this is a true story, the fire department shows up outside of my front door because I was trying to sear a steak inside and I didn't have enough ventilation.
Oh
And
gosh.
so imagine how embarrassed I am. The whole neighborhood is seeing this fire department truck show up, and I got to go out and tell them, guys, I don't have enough for everybody.
That was it, right? Yeah. Never again will I not be able to feed the troops. That's right.
And
Yeah.
that's why I went and bought that smoker for
The big one,
outside.
the 6 footer. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's so true. So this book, Predictably Irrational, opened up my eyes to this idea of emotion behind decision making. It's a great book. It basically created an industry called behavioral economics. So I'm at PepsiCo and I read this book, right? And there's experiments in the book that Dan uses to explain a concept. So I took that book and I said to myself, okay, so there are these nudges. And for you guys out there that don't know what I'm even talking about, behavioral economics is a study of something called cognitive heuristics. And the idea here is that we have these shortcuts to decision making, right? And we use these shortcuts to make decisions fast and easy. And when we make fast, easy decisions, we're more likely to take on that behavior. It's just kind of a simple concept, if you will. So what the idea was, like, if we just knew what these heuristics were, or these nudges, I'm doing air quotes for you out there, or maybe even triggers. You may have even heard of these terms called triggers. If we could just trigger our customers by incorporating one of these heuristics into, a piece of marketing, we can shortcut their decision making and they'll go buy more of our product. So here's what I did. I remember I was at PepsiCo and I went into a shopping, a grocery store. And I remember I went to the beverage aisle. And in that, there were these, we had Coca Cola and Pepsi. They're kind of pretty close to each other in the aisle, as you can imagine, soda aisle. And they both had what's called BOGOs, buy one, get one free. So I looked at that and I said to myself, wait a minute, they're both using this heuristic, this nudge. They're both using the BOGO nudge. And I said to myself, well, why does one, if I'm here, which one wins? They're both the exact same language, buy one, get one free. They're both exactly priced the same. So I said, which one works? So all of a sudden I started getting nervous about that. I said, okay, so who wins? Well, the first thing that came to mind, like you guys out there probably said, is like, it's the one with the branding. It's the brand equity. That's the one that wins. And I'm not going to debate that too much. I'm like, yeah, that makes some sense. However, I literally the next weekend, I went to a Lowe's home improvement store. I was trying to buy a smoker because I was scared about firefighters coming to my house. So I go to Lowe's home. So, for real, I go to the sprinkler aisle, Steve. I was changing sprinkler heads. One of my sprinkler heads broke. And I went to that aisle and there were two sprinkler heads I could use. And I thought to myself, I don't know what brand. Like, I have no idea. Like, how many people can name even one sprinkler head brand? There's just no way. Like, vast majority don't know. I've never done that before. And I said, well, wait a minute. Which brand works? If I don't have any clue what the brand is, which brand works? So equity doesn't mean anything to me because I have no clue. They're basically the same price. They're both made of plastic. So then I said, oh, wait, it must be the design of the box. It's got to be the box, the color of the box, the look and feel of the box. That's when I'm sitting there in front. It's like, well, wait, what wins? Why would some people prefer a blue box versus a green box? And I said, wait, maybe green is associated with your lawn and maybe blue is associated with water. I don't know. Like, I'm not really into the sciences at this point, but it started dawning on me that there are choices marketers can make. I could use the blue box or the green box if I don't know anything about equity and they're basically both the same price. But I said, why blue? Why green? There must be science behind it. And that's when I decided that just nudging, just using these heuristics was not enough. It's just not enough because we're all using these things all the time. All marketers are using these nudges, these heuristics, these behavioral economic principles. That's what took me to my journey of trying to build more sophistication because I think it lacks a lot of sophistication. And there's only three reasons for this, right? The first one is if you are thinking to yourself, I found this really cool nudge in the book, Predictably Irrational. I'm going to use it. I'm going to use social proof. I'm going to tell people that thousands of people trust my company every day with their money. Fine. The problem with that is that First off, it assumes that people have a reason to change their behavior. That's a big assumption, guys. That's a big assumption. Secondly, that you're going to say, oh, and that they are motivated to actually change. So there's not just a reason, but there's actually a motivation to change. That's a big assumption. We lack a lot of motivation in this today's world. And the third thing is that you're assuming that people aren't resistant to behavioral change. So whenever you use a heuristic, and if you aren't accounting for those three things, brother, you're just throwing spaghetti at the walls. You're hoping that something works. And what happens is sometimes it works. It does work. It happened to me. It works. And then you go, yeah, you tell your organization social proof works. They go, great. We're all in. We're going to put this on our website. And we find that social proof fails. I'm like, wait, it worked one time. Why not the other time? We call that world context, Steve. You ever heard about that? They're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, it only works in context. That lacks sophistication. That answer lacks sophistication because you as a marketer control context. So it's not just enough to say, well, in some contexts it works, in some contexts it doesn't work. As a behavioral scientist and a researcher and a marketer, you control that context. That's what I want to talk about today is how to bring more sophistication into your marketing.
Yeah, and I think the lack of sophistication is that we're looking for an easy silver bullet to quickly
Yeah.
solve everything, and we think this is going to work right away. And I think that's what really appealed to me about your book was before that I was writing a one size fits all message. And then when I ran into your book, it really helped me start to look at things very different. There's not a one size fits all.
There is not. It's based upon context. But what's more important is to understand how to deconstruct that context so you don't just say, well, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works in my industry, sometimes it doesn't. That is not true. That is a superficial way of thinking about these sciences. And the sciences are very clear that if you expand it outside of behavioral economics, you can actually build the context you need so that that nudge, that BE principle, behavioral economics principle works. So problem number one, it is.
Hmm. Yeah. And we've covered this, eh? So you're using the wrong moment often, or you're not considering the other moments.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think that sometimes we use a nudge or one of these heuristics in our marketing, and we believe that it's going to work, but we only know it's going to work if it does not conflict with somebody's goals in the moment. So let me give you an example of the one that's really kind of classic here. And the issue is um, there was a study years ago that people did in New York City. I think it was NYU study. And what they did was they looked at taxi drivers, in New York City, and almost overnight, the average tip for a taxi driver in New York City went from 10% to 22% overnight almost. So, do you have any idea on why that was the case, Steve?
Maybe they asked in a particular way when they didn't. They just expected the tip to be assumed, or maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just
what it
swinging.
what it really was that all of a sudden taxi drivers started having the computer system in the back seats where people could use credit cards.
Mm,
So on the display, what they also did was they created tip amounts, predefined tip amounts by percentages.
hmm.
And the lowest tip amount was 15%, the middle tip amount was 20%, and then the highest tip amount was 25%. Right. So, well, here's what happened. Then basically, most people hit the middle button. On the average, it's a middle button. And so they go, oh my gosh, this tip thing works. This is great. People love the middle option. Why? And we could talk all about it. It's a simpler choice. I don't want to take the highest price. That's expensive. The lowest price is kind of awkward because the guy's right there and he would know that I gave him the lowest tip available. So people hit the middle tip. It's a concept called anchoring and adjustment. So you may have taken this principle and you say, okay, so really the middle option is the best option. And we all do it. We all think, well, let's give them the middle option. Thinking, if we get a really high priced option, we don't think many people are going to use, then they're more likely to use our middle option. That was the option we wanted them to use in the first place. That comes from the book, Predictably Irrational. It comes from this idea that people prefer the middle option, except there are certain circumstances where they don't prefer the middle option. And this would be an example of what if you get in that taxi cab, you're going down, 42nd, And all of a sudden, boom, your tip, your fare is ready. What's your tip going to be? We assume that the natural, most likely thing is people are going to be at the middle box. However, if you understood my goals as a customer, what if I had these aspirational goals of buying or trying to make my rent? Frankly, let's say if I'm trying to make my rent, I have a totally different context. My goal is to make my rent, and that middle box actually is not my preferred choice in any stretch of the imagination. In fact, what you did is you'd say, well, then you're going to hit the lowest box, which is still 20 or 15%. Nope, it's not. What I will do under that mind state, Steve, is I'll look at that lowest tip amount, 15%, and I'll anchor off the 15% because it's the lowest one. Why does that resonate with me? Because I know I'm under a heavy budget constraint. I'll look at that 15% and go, can I afford 15%? Seems a little high. Let me go and adjust that down to 10% or 8% or even 5% or no tip. You just made price this powerful anchor, especially when you said 25% tip at the very highest. So people are now anchoring on the lowest tip amount, and you're thinking to myself, can I afford 15%? Maybe I can't. If you don't understand the aspirational goals of your customer, you can use the wrong heuristic. If I understood that my customer is under budget constraints, I wouldn't even think about using anchoring and adjustment, or I'd use it smarter. I would use something maybe called license effect, which is the idea that we want balance. So we may say something like, well, you didn't, this is a really bad example, but let's say you say, there are certain times that at, that helping somebody out with a higher tip benefits you. And so there's a license effect because we have this desire that sometimes I can be too cheap and sometimes I want to splurge. So we all have this mental desire for balance. I may use that, or sunk cost fallacy, saying, you know what? You're already out $10 for the fare. What's another 10 cents? What's another dollar? Right? So those are more heuristics that would make sense to somebody who's on a budget constraint. But instead, we just go, people love the middle option. Let's give them 3 options and assume that people are going to want the first option. And a lot of times that works, but guys, there's sometimes where it doesn't work. So if you don't understand your goals, the goals of your customer, you can use the wrong heuristic. That means that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's why it's so important.
That's excellent. I've been thinking about, I now have an option on one of my websites where I have option 1, 2, and 3. And of course, you see that typical thing, most popular, the one in the middle or whatever. But it's been going through my mind, would it be effective if I said, and using your term, if your goal is this option is perfect for you. But if your goal is this, then option 2 is right in the sweet spot. I'm
But
curious.
remove price away from it, right? Or,
Mhm.
what that does, right, is it has. I love that it focuses on their goals versus what I get for my price. That pure price value kind of component where a lot of us make decisions. So it's
Mhm.
something to certainly experiment with. And it's not to say that middle options don't work, but does it work all the time for your customers? Maybe there's a better option out there for you.
Yeah.
It's neat. I
All
like
right.
that idea.
Excellent. So, problem 2. Your nudge may conflict with your customer's core motivation. And so, would you do me a favor and just help me? I'm simple. When
Sure.
you say nudge in this context, give an example of that for me.
Yeah. So anytime I use the word nudge, it's gonna be using one of these behavioral economic heuristics. So let's use this one, social proof. So there is a nudge that people use in marketing sometimes that will say, hey, if we just put in towards the bottom of our piece of marketing, thousands of people trust us to use our trust their brands to ROI,
Hmm.
your company, right?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of proof in the marketplace that says that social proof works really well. It's a really easy thing to place into, into an advertisement. You can have a counter. I've seen people do counters where like number of customers served and it
Hmm.
moves and stuff like that. So there's this concept called social proof. It's a nudge. What that does is it tells the brain that there is more value in things that are behaviors that other people take. So if a lot of people are taking on a behavior, if a lot of people are trusting ROI, I should too. I don't have to do the cost benefit analyses. I don't have to really think it. If a lot of brands like mine trust ROI, I'm okay with that decision. And I will tell you, it works okay. It will work for you, except if it's not into your customer's core motivation. So let me give you an example of this. So remember in the book Marketing Mind States, there are 9 core human motivations that drive the vast majority of human behavior. Things like belonging motivation, right? Our desire to feel like we're affiliated and accepted. There's my book. Or empowerment is our desire for control. Or in this case, social proof, this idea of social proof is oftentimes really good for somebody who's driven by the achievement motivation and success, right? But let's say, for instance, you're a luxury brand. And if you knew that your customers desire or are driven by the esteem motivation, which is our desire for status. So, esteem, it's a motivation that's defined as the desire to feel unique, praised, and admired by others. So, a lot of luxury brands are in this space: Prada, Gucci, etc. So, if this was your customer, and then you said thousands or millions of people trust Prada, that would take esteem from the brand, right, Steve? Like social proof doesn't make any sense because if I want to feel like status and I see the thing that I bought that I believe that brings me status and it's on everybody out there on the market, there's no status to that. So some people don't think that way, right? You got to think, does that nudge, does that behavioral economic principle make sense to the core motivation? If my desire was success, then yeah, thousands of people or thousands of millionaires trust my brand. If I desire success, I go, okay, millionaires trust this brand. I want to be a millionaire, therefore I should trust the brand. So you can't just use these things. So sometimes the nudges we use conflict with the core motivation of my customers. So there's a way you can think about these through that core motivation, and we can eliminate some kind of dumb ideas, frankly.
Yeah, so like I'm comes to mind like not your grandmother's lemonade or when what's it, Mike's Hard Lemonade has that,
Yeah.
not your granddaddy's lemonade or something. So they're like being a little more exclusive. It's not like all the grandmothers love this. It's like, no, this one's a little bit different. It's got a little
Create an
bite.
outgroup. It's
Yeah,
creating an outgroup, right? That's right.
exactly.
So that's called outgroup bias, right? There's actually a bias that takes advantage of. And then what you want to do is you say to yourself, does that bias or does that nudge
Mhm.
work? And it could very well work. In fact, it works really well for people who are driven by the autonomy motivation, which is desire for freedom. So if and it just feels like that brand feels like it's rebellious. It feels kind of like it's for freedom loving. Like there's some exclusivity in there as well. So I think it makes total sense on why that would work. You create an out group if you want to promote that your brand is synonymous with freedom and with a little bit of exclusivity. Makes total sense. Just go through that habit of thinking through those heuristics and those nudges through that lens. And if you can't make the connection, then I will tell you that you're throwing spaghetti at the walls again.
Yeah, exactly. Because you think, yeah, everybody loves Mike's. No, we don't want that. We
That's
don't. We
right.
want the opposite because the folks that really enjoy it, look at them. They're weird.
Yeah,
They don't
that's
want to
right.
be like everybody. We want more weirdos. Or
Mhm.
that's just. I
Yeah.
love. I love that one size fits all message is like the worst default move you can make in marketing.
Yeah, it totally is. If you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing.
Exactly. All right. Problem number 3. Your nudge may conflict with their natural approach to decisions.
That's right. So, we talk about this in the book. The science is called regulatory fit theory. It's from Tori Higgins. And I'm going to, basically make it as simple as I can, which means that we have this natural approach to decisions. We either seek to maximize gains and good things in our lives, or we seek to minimize risk or bad things in our life. I know it's super simple and probably oversimplified. There's a lot more smarts behind 30 or 40 years of psychology, social psychology research in this. But there are times where the nudge we use, that behavioral economic heuristic, that trigger we use, conflicts with our natural approach. And this is one that just irks me. I hear it all the time at conferences and stuff like that. And they'll use this thing. And actually, it came from I believe Daniel Kahneman, who was the father, arguably, of behavioral economics. He won a Nobel Prize in economics. So he's much more successful than I'll ever be, and much smarter than I'll ever be. But he has this statistic that just kind of thrown out there a lot. And it says that we value things that we lose at 2 times of something that we gain. So our desire to not lose something is twice as powerful as our desire to gain something. So we use that all the time. And so people use loss aversion. There's this concept called loss aversion, which is we assign value to things that higher value to things that we believe we're about to lose or that we currently own. So this is why if you want to buy my beaten up old rocking chair, my reclining chair, I'm going to charge you $5,000 because I love that chair and I don't want to lose it. I assign great value, even though it's disgusting, right? So people use this loss aversion way too much. Here's why. Yeah, loss aversion is really, really good if you are in what's called that prevention regulatory state that Tori Higgins talks about, which means these people seek to minimize risk. So if you're naturally opposed to minimizing risk in your life or whatever category you're buying, then loss aversion works really well. It works really well, in fact. However, data shows, at least in the US, that 60% of the time we're in what's called a promotion regulatory state or we're optimistic. So we seek risk. We think that opportunity comes from taking chances. It's in the American spirit. It's in the entrepreneurial world that we live in. It's freedom. So if I'm in that state of mind, and by the way, 60% of people in general are in that state of mind, then when you use loss aversion, that does not naturally fit with that person's natural state of mind. So your loss aversion is not even close to being 2x what it is on the other side of things. So people just use loss aversion and they don't think about the regulatory state of their customer. If they're not in congruence, you're going to find much less success with loss aversion. So again, it's kind of important for you to understand some of these three principles. What's their natural approach? What's their core motivation? And do you understand the goal that they have? And those should dictate which of these heuristics you use versus a popular book. Even if it's my book, like I talk about 21 of these heuristics. Well, not all 21 work. And you can't just tell your clients, oh, context matters. It works in some contexts. Give them when it works. I'm not going to use loss aversion if I know that my customers are optimistic. It doesn't make any sense to use that. So it's certainly not going to be my first one that I use. That's why we want to be more sophisticated and bring some more kind of thoughtfulness into our heuristics and our nudging.
And so to identify these three things for your particular product or service, you have to consider that moment. This is not how they are consistently. This is not how they operate their lives. This is just when they're teeing up to make a decision about the potential solution that your product or service offers. They position themselves into that moment of positioning that may be totally different when they're out deciding what to eat for dinner.
Totally right about that. You are not one motivation, you are all motivations, and those change throughout the day. You do not have one goal in life. You have many, many, many goals in life, and they change throughout the day. You're both promotion and prevention. You're both optimistic and cautious depending on the day. What you need to do is study your customers at the moment of these decisions. Just like you said, Steve, when they're going to consider your brand, or they're going to consider what solutions you offer. That's where you have to understand their goals, their motivations, and their approach. And when you do that, all those three problems that we just talked about, they kind of come together, and now you can select the right trigger that fits with those three conditions. That's why we talk about sophistication in marketing.
Is trigger the same thing as a nudge?
It is. I should stop using these words. I've used BE, nudge, heuristic, cognitive heuristic, trigger. Yeah, probably all those are the same. They're all the same.
Motivations. Yep. Natural approaches. We need to get a lingo. Yeah. We call it like Simple Steve's lingo. And get that distilled down where guys like me can be like, I like this, Will, but now I can he says this, but what it really means, it means this. See?
No, trigger's the word, man. I think trigger's the one. It just feels like people talk about triggers, and because I think when you said something really smart, where you said that we all expect that there's just like one size, like I have this trick, this golden nugget that's going to get people to buy. And so I'll hear that we want to trigger a behavior. We want to trigger behavior. I think of that as being one of these things I just talked about, these nudges, and they're actually really cool, but they're not anywhere near as effective if you don't have those first three variables under your control, if you will.
It's the big fallacy of our life is the silver bullet concept. It'd just be so nice if there was just one thing, so I can get to, with all the other things, just give me that one little simple thing. It's not that easy.
It's not. But I think by what I can get you from, so in my book, I talk about 21 of these triggers. In other books,
Hmm.
there are 8. In other books, there are 100, literally 100 of these things. What I think that this model helps you do is deselect. It allows you to cut out stuff that just doesn't make any sense. And therefore I can get my 21 down to 4. And then go have fun, man. Go try to experiment your way out of it. Go try to A/B test your way out of your situation to try to simplify. Will you ever get to the thing? No. Can I get you to 4? Yeah, I could probably get you to 4. I can probably get you to 4.
You can probably start to prioritize those and have your different layers, meaning your different versions of content, and then you can go, if this is your motivation, click here. If this is your aspiration, click here.
I love that.
I don't,
I
I
love it.
don't know. That might be fun.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was just we've got now is a time of the show, Will, where we get to watch you dance, and
Okay.
obviously, I prepared you for one answer, but before we go there, I want to talk about Will's book. Now, if you don't have Will's book, Marketing to Mind States, this book really changed my perception on marketing. I'm a story brand agency, and that's like if you can start to get your content to honor the rules of story, you're way ahead of the competition. Way. But if you can start to discern the different motivations that your potential target audience is, then just like these gloves right here, you can design gloves that'll fit those personas or avatars,
Yep.
still honor the rules of story, but then you're leading to different stories that are in the moment
Mhm.
that you're and so I really encourage you, if you haven't read this book, you need to, because the truth is your content is a one size fits all content. And in order to be competitive, to in order to be effective, you need to dial that in, and that'll help you discern that. So I'm wanted to encourage that.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
All right. So now, well, we need I'm going to turn on the music.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And so what I wanted to change the name of this song, and you called it BOGO Nudge. I think that would be a great name for this song, BOGO Nudge.
Go nudge.
I just, it's a great term. When you said that, I go, man, we got to put that on something, because
It
that's
is.
a
Yeah.
great term, BOGO
There's a
Nudge.
there's a there's a brand out there somewhere that right now is like, we're changing everything. We're going to be called Pogo Nudge, or at least a band or something. Some kind of new cool band out there.
All right.
Nudge.
So this is the point where we throw these questions out, and Will's going to give us his feelings on this. So in your opinion, what is the most common misconception about using behavioral economics in marketing?
Yeah, I thought a little bit about this one. It is this, and I hear this all the time, especially from competitors, right? And they go, well, all you have to do is A/B test your way out and experiment your way out. So here's what they'll do. They'll take 21 of these triggers, or that we've been talking about, and they'll say, well, let's just go put one in versus another one, just A/B test ourselves out of it. That is a big misconception, because remember, we just literally talked about it. There are different mind states that you have in the moment. There are different motivations and things like that. And so, can you A/B test your way out of it? In a way, you can, but it's really expensive, guys. I just told you 21 of these things. What if there are 40 or 100? I don't believe there are, but what if that's the case? You can try to A/B test yourself out of it. It's going to be expensive, and it's going to take a long time. So that is a misconception, I think, that agencies will tell you all the time, because they don't want to do the research. They go, we're just going to do a bunch of A/B testing and get ourselves out of the situation. We know exactly what to say and how to say it and when to say it. Why do that work? If you can start off with a foundational model that gets you, we can deselect a whole bunch of bad examples and bad experiments and just get you to a good set of fewer experiments. That's where you want to be.
Also, the other problem I think, Will, in A/B testing is, let's say you land on an answer, but then something dramatic happens in our culture just like
Yeah.
the past couple of years, then that totally resets the whole board.
And you're going to start from scratch. If you
That's
didn't know the motivation, you're going to start all from scratch again. Okay, what are all the possible variables I could put into this, and how
mhm.
can I A/B test my way out of it? Oh, and by the way, you're trying to run a business at the same time, Steve.
I
Right?
know,
You're not a think tank. So that's
right?
another issue, right? You're taking resources from growing your business away, so you can try to experiment your way out into better creative. It's not smart. It's just really, um, it's not very sophisticated. Do A/B test your way out of stuff.
It's the X, what do they call it? The X a sketch. Is that what they call that? Remember that? Where
I
you
remember
like
that thing.
the little thing you made the thing, and then when you wanted to erase it, you just shook it.
Yeah, yeah. Start from
Well,
scratch.
exactly. And so, but that's what's happening if you think you said it and forget it. Oh, good, we figured that out. Let's move on. I don't
Yep.
know. You're
You're
vulnerable.
right. Yep.
Okay. So, what inspired you to research the limitations of behavioral economics and marketing, Will Leach?
Yeah. I almost lost my job at PepsiCo. It's really easy to understand. I did an experiment inside when I was at PepsiCo, and I told the organization this is why people buy. Then we did the exact same experiment again, and I had a different answer. And so I tried to hide that fact because I had two answers to the same question, and it got out. And they said, you know what? Something's wrong, because if you can't tell me which of these experiments is correct, I tried to A/B test myself out of it, and both were wrong. He said, there's no real reason to do marketing research anymore. That's my job. So, really, it was that which brought me into this world of social psychology and anthropology and just reading. And I read that book, man. This book, Particularly Irrational, opened my eyes to a whole bunch of things around emotions. And then from there, boom, I couldn't stop reading. But I stopped watching football. I stopped going out. I was just, all I could do was read this stuff. I will read more books in a year on this topic than watch TV. I love it. So I got involved. That's really how it came into it. And that's when I started thinking about limitations of behavioral economics. Just as I said, that experiment inside the Lowe's, I was like, doesn't behavioral economics doesn't explain this. A trigger itself, my BOGO doesn't explain. It doesn't explain why I would choose one or the other. So there has to be more. That's why.
So, would you say that in that moment you had a risk or a loss aversion motivation?
Loss aversion. I was in prevention because I had a mortgage. I was like, I'm in prevention, regulatory focus. I can't lose my wife and my mortgage at the same time by losing my job. I made very cautious decisions at that point, and there's probably a good heuristic of loss aversion is you better go figure it out so you don't lose your job. Yeah, it all comes together.
That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a Mindstate Marketing Hour where you learn how to use science to connect with your clients. It's just a human understanding model. So here's the deal, Will. Great book. You got to read it. Then you got to do some work.
Yeah.
Will, you convinced me. I need to do this. Can you just do it for me?
Probably do that for you. That's why I love this stuff. You don't have to become a PhD in neuropsychology to do this work. Let me do that work for you. So no, I've got a company that does these things called brand restages, right? And these restages is where I will do the research to understand the mind state of your customer, as well as kind of the goals, the motivations, the approach, these triggers that you need. I will then actually look at your marketing, Steve, through that lens, and I'll show you what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. And I'll give you recommendations on how to change your marketing. And you know what? If you want to just say, Will, I just want you to take over, I will actually take over your marketing. I will send it to my friends over at ROI. They will use this information to reconstruct your marketing. I will actually redesign your marketing so we know that it's psychologically optimized. It's what I do.
It's exciting, Will. You know, we're all doing our best, and when you think we business owners, entrepreneurs, folks in positions that are in charge of marketing, we're all doing the best we can with what we know. But my goodness, we know that things are competitive, and we need to up our game. And so to have an option like this is huge. So way to go for taking that, not rejecting that call to action to write a book, because there's a lot of people that when I look at your book sales, Will, I'm impressed, brother.
Still
A
going.
lot of people want to know about this and apply this, and so this is great stuff. It helps folks. It helps
Good.
businesses. So, all
Thank you.
right, that's another excellent conversation on the Mind State Marketing Hour, and let's see if I can do this outro. Will, do you know folks can listen to this? This is not just a video, we're a podcast as well. And it's on all the popular stations out there: Stitcher, Buzzsprout, iHeart. And of course, you got a YouTube channel, the Mind State channel. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Be sure to like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Mind State Marketing Hour. So ending broadcasting. Now this is at awkward time. So I heard a little song. I'm going to sing it.
Okay.
So